Alright, so welcome to the first episode of Turn and Burn TV. Basically, if you don't know who we are, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/turnandburnworkshop. Today's project is going to be a turkey pot call, slate friction call. This is what they look like when they're finished. And these are done out of acrylic and burl castings. They're pretty cool. I get my blanks from someone named Thomas DeGaulle. He's on a Facebook group called Wood Turning, and I'll put that information at the end of the video. These are how the blanks come to me. He circles them up and gets them pretty true, and then I can turn them on the lathe. I order my glass soundboards and my slate tops from a website called Custom Sawing. They have good prices. Just make sure you order more than like 1 or 2 soundboards at a time, because they ship them in envelopes, so shipping's the same no matter how many you order. So if you want to save a little bit of cash, that's probably the best way to do it. And I will put their information in the end of the video as well, so anyone who wants to order some parts from them can do it. One thing I would recommend is, if you don't go through Thomas, find someone who's really good at casting acrylics. I might even start doing it myself, but that's probably a long way out because of the equipment you need. He uses a pressure pot to cast all of his blanks, so they have very, very few, if not no, air bubbles in them. So really low risk of them exploding on the lathe. Also, he did send me a blank once that he had some trouble in the shop, power outages and stuff, and it wasn't perfect, and it wasn't a big deal to me. Filled in a little bit of voids with CA glue, but he sent me 2 blanks to replace the one that he messed up. So he's a really good guy to deal with. I can't give him enough credit for what he does, and they're awesome looking blanks when they're done. So if you want to figure out how to make a turkey pot call out of resin and burl casting, stay tuned. Alright, so what I've done is I've moved you guys over to my workbench, and we're going to find center on this blank. I basically have a pair of calipers here that I put some duct tape around and put a marker on. That'll do a good enough job for now. Basically what I do is I find where I think center is and just adjust these in until you think you're on the edge, and then check how close you are. If you're pretty close, it'll rub the same amount all the way around, and then you can make a dimple. See, I need to go this way just a little bit. Then you can make a dimple where your center is. That looks pretty good. There's other ways to do that. You can buy cheap center finders online. They work great. Basically, I take a small drill bit now, just get my center hole established. See my mark. And I don't have a drill press, so this is pretty much all done by hand. And it doesn't matter how deep you go, because I'm actually going to drill all the way through the blank at some point. And you'll see why later in the video. With acrylic, it's important to drill slow. You don't want to heat it up because it will tend to crack around the edges. And also, it can melt, and then you can't get your drill bit out. So that's just another thing to remember. So I go up a couple sizes at a time. You can tell the levels if you're really heating it up. truck in your wood turnings. With the acrylic, you're just going to crack that all out if you try and put that in. So for my Nova, I use a 3/8 drill bit. And that seems to work for me. If you have a different manufacturer for your screw chuck, then you might need a different size bit, but you can figure that out. It up, and then I'll show you how to hollow the inside. We're turning about 1900 RPM on this lathe. It's important to cut the acrylic pretty fast, otherwise you end up with chip out, and you have to go back with CA and fill it in. I really don't like working with CA, so I'd rather just turn it at a high speed to begin with. So we'll get started here. Just make sure you're not going to hit the tool rests. Scraper on the grinding wheel and finish rounding it out. We got a little bit of a flat spot there, and then we'll move to the face. We'll measure the slates and the glass, and we'll go from there. All right, so now we've got the front trued up. You can see it's kind of cracked out. That's all right. I ordered my slates from a website called Custom Sign. Good prices. Just order a bunch of them if you're going to order them, because the shipping is pretty much the same. They come in a small envelope. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure for the slate to go in, and then there's a glass soundboard that's a little bit smaller than this that we'll have to make a pedestal for. But first I'm just going to take my calipers, measure this, mark the blank, and then we'll use the parting tool to kind of rough that out. So I've got my calipers measured to just a little bit smaller than what the slate's going to be, and I'll just turn the lathe on and measure. Put a mark on there. fit our piece of slate. And it's important when you make these calls, especially on a wood, you actually want the recess a little bit bigger than the slate because as season change or the moisture content in the air changes, the wood's going to swell and contract and do all sorts of funky stuff, and you don't want the slate or the glass to pop out because it's shrunk around it. So I'll get that hollowed out. Test it. Doesn't quite fit in there, so we're going to make that a little bit bigger. And that fits just about perfect. You can see there's a little bit of a gap around the edge. That's what you want because you're going to center this when you glue it in. So I wouldn't go any bigger than that. Now you just want to make it flush to the surface, which we're almost there. Sometimes I get lucky. Looks to me like the center is probably what's holding us up, so I'm just going to hit that with the on the front face of that. I'm just going to go around to the side here. This is where you get into a little bit of trouble because that's a sharp corner. We just want to bevel that over, make it rounded, take this chip out off that sharp edge. So woodturner's first rule of thumb is always leave your drink pretty far away from the lathe, especially if it's not in a bottle. So that's where I went. Now we're going to start hollowing this out. And I'll mark out a decent sized pedestal for the soundboard to sit on. And that's how we're going to set our depth, is this pedestal. Everything else will get hollowed out pretty far down. I usually go as deep as about an inch. And then I take material off the back of the blank to set the depth after we drill the holes. So I will show you all of that. First thing I'm going to do is just touch this up on the grinder. I sharpen all my tools freehand, so shame on me. I can't afford a Tormek or anything like that right now, so this is what we do. They come out pretty good, and you get lots of good practice, which is nice. Like I said, these older tools aren't high-speed steel, so they really done pretty quick on this. I'll be picking up some better tools here in the future. For now, this is what we got. lot you can do to speed up this process. When you're working with acrylic, and when you're working with hollowing, even in wood, you gotta take your time. Try and rush through there, you get a nasty catch, this thing's gonna come off the woodworm screw. I don't care how tight it is on there. Also, if you heat up this tool, you're gonna crack possibly around this center hole. You know, it's not gonna come out good. So you really need to take your time. And you really need to touch up your tools when you need to touch up your tools. I mean, this one's starting to make a little bit of noise. It's not cutting as well, so I'm just gonna take 3 seconds, touch it up on the grinding wheel. That's all the time it took. And now I can guarantee that I'm gonna have better cuts and be safer while I'm doing this. So don't try and rush it. About an inch in there, we're going to take this pedestal down so our glass sits about 1 thickness of slate below the slate top. And I can do that with the scraper. There's really no way to touch up these edges. I can come back through with the parting tool and just make that seamless. So I will do that after I cut it down to where I need it to be. So just put a burr back on my scraper. That's about the thickness of the slate, maybe a little bit more. So that's going to be perfect. So we're all done there. All right, so I've got you over at the workbench here. We've got our blank hollowed out on the lathe, depth set for the soundboard, slots cut for the slate, and turkey calls have actually holes around the bottom. And it doesn't matter really how you do it. It's all based on sound. I went with a traditional uniform template, and actually the way I made this is I got one of those orbital sanding pads. I put it on a piece of pine board, and they're a little bit too big to just use themselves as a template. So I just drew lines from the center out to the center of each hole, and then I could measure the distance that I needed, and I made just a pine blank. And really all you have to do is take the drill bit that you used for whatever size hole and drop it through the center and just use that as an alignment pin so you can mark your holes. And the good thing about turning this with the opening first is that this hole should always be center. So your holes that you drill will always be centered as well. And basically what I do then is I just take a marker and would either go down through the holes. This one's not really fine tipped enough. So what I'll do is I'll just use a small drill bit, center myself in each hole, and just start it. And like I said, I might throw a piece of tape over this just to keep this template from moving, because you don't want it to spin on you. If you're just marking them, it's a little bit easier, but if it spins, then nothing will be in the exact spot. So just center yourself in each hole. Make sure you're pretty well centered and are drilling straight down. You just need to start it. That's really all you need to do. If you're really fancy, you can make this out of a piece of corian or even some metal, and then you won't have to worry about the template wearing out, and you could use the final size drill bit as the drill to go down through here with. Back where we started. Take the tape off, and you should have some holes pretty well centered around that center hole. So now you just want to go down through right into the blank all the way through. Then you can go up a couple sizes. Still drilling acrylic, so you don't want to jump up too many sizes. Plus, once you have your template set, it's really easy to just keep going back and tracing your steps. Don't worry if you chip out a little bit. That's why you drill these before you turn it on the back side. Alright, and I go all the way up, usually to a 3/8 bit. It's really up to you what you want to do. Then you have your pattern coming through. And you can finish off with a larger size bit. All right, so there's that. You can see how they drilled through on the bottom, and that's actually going to act as your depth gauge. And these holes came out a little bit more of in a triangle. It's probably because I didn't just start with the size drill bit that fits snug in these holes. Like I've said, when I mark them, they don't come out like that. So I just didn't want to run upstairs and get another marker. So that's fine. It's not going to affect the function of the column. Once you turn it down, it'll be hard to notice. So we'll get ahead to that. All right, basically what I've done is I've come in here, just clean this face up, and I don't know if you can see, but you can see through these holes the thickness of what you have left in your blank. So I probably need to take about a 1/4 inch off this. You really want the thickness of this soundboard to be about a 1/4 inch plus or minus a little bit. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Give it a little bit of a shape. I'm gonna leave these edges pretty much alone. I just took them down so that they were smooth. We'll just cut in and make this a little bit concave in here, just so these sound holes have about a 1/4 inch before they go through. So you gotta be careful. And you just want to check your thickness. And the inside of these holes probably are just over a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to sharpen up my tool. I'm going to get ready to take some clean finishing cuts on that. Alright, so my camera died out on me a little bit, but basically what I did is I just took my finishing cuts. Make sure you're riding the bevel of the tool. Nice, slow movement, easy finishing cuts. You'll see there's not much of a tool finish left on there. It's very nice. We're going to go back and we're going to wet sand this and finish it with polyurethane. I wet sand everything, even wood. A lot of people don't like to put water on wood. I'm not sure why it has water in it when it's growing. If it's dry wood and you're just wet sanding it, it's not really going to hurt anything. You just have to let it dry before you put a finish on it. Keeps the dust down. It gives you a better finish because it raises any end grain, lets you cut it better. But I'm only going to wet sand this 100 then 220. I don't start any lower than 100 because it really puts more marks in it than the tools do if you get a good clean tool finish. So I'm going to do 100, 150, 220, wet sand, nice and clean. And then we'll put a couple coats of polyurethane on it. That'll stick to the acrylic fine. We'll polish it with some wax, and then I'll show you how to glue everything together. All right, so we're back. We're ready to wet sand. I got my blue Solo cup here full of some sandpaper. Let's put some water in it. All right, we're going to start out, we're at about 2,000 RPM still. We're going to start out with some 100 grit. And that should not be too aggressive for this. I'm going to get my tool rest out of the way. This is pretty messy. So you want to wear safety glasses. Probably get your stuff later for and then you can see the finish we're left with. The wood's a little wet, but we're pretty good. There's not really any tool marks. Like I said, you can't really touch up this side once you get them out this way. There's sludge in the holes that we'll have to take care of. But other than that, I'm going to let this dry, put some polyurethane on it, and then we'll glue it up. All right, so we're back a few minutes later. Our blank has dried out. So we're going to put a little urethane on it. And I either do this with a towel or another piece of cotton fabric. I'll just use the corner of an old shirt. Just want to clean this lip up here a little bit by hand. I don't like to get the fabric that close to the lathe when it's running. And then we'll just wipe this on like a wipe-on poly. And you'll see how that really brings out the color. Just make sure you get around the top, so you want that coated too. And I usually do 4 or 5 coats. I won't take you through that process, but you can pretty much see what the final product's going to look like. And you want to do thin coats, build it nice and slow. You don't want any runs. So I'll let this dry like that, and then we'll take you over the workbench, and I have another one that's already done that just needs to be glued up, and I can show you how we glue it up. Alright, so we're back over at the workbench, and this is one that I've already turned. So I have an orange acrylic and burl combination. You can see my holes came out a lot better on this one because I actually took the time to mark them. And basically what I'm going to take you through are the steps to completing this. And you want to take some sandpaper, and it's important that you do this. You want to rough up both sides of your glass soundboard. Some people use an etching compound. I just like to use a sandpaper. This is 100 grit, and it's important for the sound that you etch the soundboard, as well as getting it to stick to the blank. Now the etching compound will frost it. I just like to have mine barely scratched up. You can use like 60 grit if you want to. I obviously don't power sand glass just because I drop them enough. I don't want to try and hold on to it while I'm using a drill to sand it. And then when you glue these together, it's important to use something like E6000 because it doesn't cure hard. So if any of the wood happens to move, it's not the end of the world. You just need a little bit of that on the center. And then take a scrap piece of wood and just get that move nice and around on the spot where you glue the glass here. Then you take your soundboard, drop it down in, push it nice and tight. You don't want to crack the glass, obviously. And then I take a clamp with a rubber pad and get a little bit closer here. Just clamp down on that. Let that set for about an hour. You can come back, glue the slate on the same manner, just putting glue around the edge. And then you let it cure overnight before you do any testing, and you should be good to go. Alright, so we're back after a couple hours, and I can undo my clamp here. And you can see that the glass soundboard has been set in. And I'm basically going to take some more E6000, and I'm going to use a stick to just put that thin layer all the way around on this rabbet joint that we made, because you don't want it to ooze out on the top. It really doesn't look good. If you get a little bit on the glass, it's okay. So then just take your clean edge, make sure that there's nothing around the top there, and you want to pop your slate in. Make sure it's centered as can be. And I don't prep the slates. Usually some hunters who buy them from me will prep them with emery cloth after. But I leave them blank in case they can do whatever they want. Don't put too much pressure on this clamp because it'll crack. There's no support for the slate in the center. And just let that dry and you'll be all set. Also, worth mentioning, you can turn your own striker dowels, but for like 30 some odd cents you can just order them in pretty much any wood from Custom Sawing. So I do that because getting a straight dowel with a skew on the lathe is more time than it's worth when you can buy them for this much money. So I do that and turn my own handles. Alright, and I'll put some pictures up of this one when it's done, and we'll do a little review segment at the end. And if you have any questions, just leave it in the comments, or I'll leave information to get a question directly to me. Alright, so I wanted to say thanks for tuning in for this episode. We can take a look at the piece that we just finished, which isn't been glued up or anything yet. But it's a very nice piece. A couple more coats of polyurethane and final buff and polish, and it'll be ready to go. This is the piece we glued up just a couple hours ago. And give it a test. I'm not the best turkey caller, so it is how it is. But I've got a lot of compliments on them, so I'll keep making them the way I do. I also want to reiterate the shout out to Thomas DeGaulle. His company is Nature World, WHIRLED. I'll put a link at the end. Also to Custom Sawing for all of their glass, slate calls. They also sell coppers if you're into metal over glass or slate over metal, any of that stuff. And any questions that you have, you can send us an email, drop them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, if you like our Facebook page at facebook.com/Chernobyl Workshop, we give away stuff every Friday once we get to a certain amount of likes, and I also have some pretty big giveaways coming up. Some nice bowls, segmented turnings, stuff like that. So we try and give out prizes as often as we can afford to, and it's a good way to get people involved. So thanks again.